This is not where we should always be doing one or the other, and I'll kind of get into exactly what I mean as we chat about this. But sleep divorce or splendid sleep separation? That is the question. So first off, who in the heck came up with this name? I don't know. I couldn't figure it out. And yet, the thing is, I think because divorce obviously has a negative connotation, this term has a negative connotation. I also think that it's important to realize and understand the underlying cultural value, the potentially like spiritual, religious aspect of sleeping together in the same room or same bed, the perceived, closeness we have with someone else. There's a lot of things that go into this that we'll be diving into. But the term sleep divorce, I don't think is a good way to paint a neutral picture of this. So I just thought the other side of the coin would be a splendid sleep separation. So the gist is when we are not in the same bed. So this can consist of sleeping in different beds, the old the I Love Lucy kind of, they were in different beds in the same room or sleeping in different rooms. So again, I'll kind of be going through the pros and cons to this, but on average, it's important to realize, most times couples aren't going into the bedroom at the exact same time, sleeping at the exact same time, which I definitely would say is not a good idea if people have different circadian rhythms, different patterns, different schedules, and that kind of thing. So if we're already not exactly in sync, then, looking at if it would be beneficial to continue not doing the exact same pattern, if that would bring out more pros than cons. So I wanted to go through a quick survey because I think it's important to kind of understand maybe what others are thinking about these topics. So this is somewhat of it's relatively older, newer, 2012. It's about 8 years old. So 63% of couples sleep most of the night separated. So that means in bed, at least, separated the whole night. So if we're cuddling, that would be kind of, more so together at some point. 26% of individuals reported better sleeping alone. 1 in 4 people. And it's also important to notice and realize that of every couple, there are 2 people, right? So 1 of every 4, that potentially means that somewhere in the range of 1 out of every 2 couples may have 1 individual, right, that feels like they sleep better alone. About 10% of people are already sleeping in separate bedrooms, about 1 in 10. There are some gender differences. So women more often are, or at least they report they're more often impacted by physical movement, tossing and turning, keeping them up at night as opposed to men. Women also indicate that snoring is a factor that keeps them up more so than men. That could be indicative of higher rates of sleep apnea, potentially for men. I don't. 60% of women say that their sleep environment keeps them awake more than their significant other, while about 50% of men make this claim, which, by the way, those figures don't specifically add up, so someone is off a little bit. But obviously this impacts women more than men, at least from report. So age does impact being able to sleep in the same bed, different places as well. So cuddling was reported 7% among 55 and above, compared to about 1 in 5 for 18 to 34-year-olds, about 15%, 35 to 54 year range. So 55-year-olds are more likely to sleep in separate bedrooms as well. So kind of also potentially may make sense. Less cuddling, less physical contact early on, more so sleeping in separate bedrooms, being okay with that. So 16% range. If we drop down to 35 to 54-year-olds, 7%, and then 18 to 34, 3%. So it's a pretty big difference between the 18 to 34 to 55 and above. So just in general, I also wanted to throw this in here. So some degree of discomfort, some degree of problems of sleeping are reported by about 85% of Americans in this study. So that's not necessarily to say every single one of these people have insomnia or some other significant, sleep disorder or something like that. But, temperature is a big factor, 43%. Again, the tossing and turning, snoring, mattress quality, age, firmness, mattress size, and this is something that I talk to people somewhat frequently about. It seems like everyone always tries the pillow, the mattress prior to working with myself or another behavioral sleep medicine specialist, because I take it as marketing. Commercials are they make you think that that's what's the issue. I would say sometimes that has a significant impact, but most of the time, something else is going on. But to get back to this, I wanted to kind of go over, and this may sound somewhat simple, but what is happening when we are sleeping? Well, we're unconscious for the most part. If we're not sleeping, then we're awake, right? And that's a different story. But when we are going to sleep, the goal is to be asleep, right? That's clearly the goal among both individuals. And I will say, as a side note, it's interesting that a lot of times one of the significant others will they will be a good sleeper and one will be a bad sleeper. There's got to be some kind of study that I need to conduct, because it just seems like that is the case. So, but to get back to this again, we are unconscious. We are not awake. This is not a process of sleeping together. We'll somehow mold our souls together. We'll be more compatible, something, whatever. But if we are awake, there are a lot of things that can impact awakeness, right? So one of these sayings that I go to is what wakes us up is not always what keeps us up. So clearly, environmental factors, significant other being one of those external environmental factors, could be something that's waking us up or keeping us up. And the third thing on here, there's no telecommunication. There's no, I forget what the other term is. Basically, I guess I'm just trying to say that when we are asleep, we are asleep, right? That's the goal. So there's the good, the bad, the neutral. I kind of want to go through some things. And again, I'm curious if anyone has thoughts on these, because this is subjective. Everyone feels differently about these kinds of things, even the meaning behind, sleeping in the same room or sleeping in different rooms or different beds, whatever. So the good, though, it can be comfortable, clearly, right? We can, for those that want to cuddle or physically enjoy falling asleep together, that kind of thing, oftentimes that's reported as a comfort factor. Knowing someone else is close by, this can again be a comfort factor. I would say that, potentially, if that's what's going on, maybe there could be something else underlying, such as fear or anxiety about sleeping alone, that kind of thing. But, again, this helps to kind of mask that. Making sure if the other individual is okay. So clearly there are other factors going on. If someone is sick, ill, you're in a caretaking role, or if someone else is a caretaker for you, clearly that's important. The perception of unity, so that's what sometimes I chat with people about when this comes up, right? And especially with the term sleep divorce, right? That kind of just makes it even more of a, well, no way, I'm not getting a sleep divorce. What does that mean, right? So what I guess I'm trying to do is expand on the other side of things, which in my opinion, my view is that if we sleep in different beds or different bedrooms, It doesn't mean that we care less about someone, that couples are less in love or anything like that. But for some, it definitely does have a lot of meaning attached to it. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily wrong, right? Everyone has their own opinions and values and beliefs, and yet sometimes it's good to see both sides of things. So another part that is good about sleeping with a significant other, and again, not to mention if there's pets or kids are coming into the room, nightmares, all that, whatever, is that, if especially, let's say, a newborn or a young child needs to be taken care of, it's easier to communicate, that kind of thing. So those kinds of situations. So let's go over to the quote-unquote bad aspects. So we touched on them by some of the survey data, but it's moving around in bed. If this is our significant other is moving around in bed and it somewhat wakes us up, if we can hear them, if they're snoring, if they get up and go and use the restroom, if they get up and go do something else, right? And I would like to say maybe these things, the moving around, snoring, getting up, maybe that's not always our significant other. Maybe that's actually us, right? So for those of you that are listening in and you're kind of cringing a little bit inside, I mean, clearly this is not something that you should feel bad about or feel guilty about. And yet it could be one of those things that does impact someone else. So there have been some studies in terms of sleep issues and relationship issues going on simultaneously. It kind of does make sense if that is a big factor, if one person is significantly impacting the other's ability to sleep. And naturally, if we don't sleep, irritability kind of comes into the equation. That kind of makes sense, right? And that's what this other study in 2013 was looking at, that if one person is somewhat blaming the other person, then, to a certain factor, that's not good for a relationship. So CBTI, what I do is cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia. It really depends on what is going on with each person. So if this is one of those things that is a major factor, it's more so something that I address with people. And sometimes it is a major factor. Other times, absolutely not. It doesn't seem to be a big deal one way or the other. But what we want to look at is, you want to start thinking of things outside of yourself as external factors. We want to reduce all of the external factors we can. So I always think of this as variability. We can control ourselves. We can control certain aspects of our environment, such as temperature, right? I mean, and yet the things that we can't control are what then may negatively impact sleep. Sometimes it may not matter, other times it may. The neutral aspect of this is, in terms of regardless of if sleeping in the same bed, separate beds in the same room, separate room, you can still participate in a lot of the same activities. So I'll say, I'll disclose here that my wife and I go to sleep at different times, and yet I basically always put her to bed. She goes to sleep a lot earlier. She gets up really early. So the thing is, just because we have separate bedtimes, separate schedules to a certain degree, it doesn't mean that you can't continue to participate in some of the things you potentially may enjoy doing. So for those of you that are tuning into this call because you're kind of thinking, well, hey, I feel like maybe it would be a good idea, for either me to sleep in a different room or for the other individual to sleep in a different room. You can still participate in some of the stuff. This doesn't have to be like all right, we're getting a sleep divorce after 6 p.m., no talking or whatever. So just some thoughts there. So sleeping in separate spaces, part of this could be, I definitely have worked with people that are worried and concerned about waking the other person, And so it becomes something that actually decreases their ability to sleep. And the worry and the concern aspect, sometimes is actually warranted, other times it's not. But again, this is an external factor. This is something that's bringing in difficulty with maintaining your own self, so to speak. So if that is something that's going on, then, to a certain degree, if that's pretty significant, then yeah, that may be something that kind of guides you towards potentially trying out a different routine. Yeah, and this can go hand in hand with, if you're sleeping, you're unconscious, the other person's sleeping, they're unconscious, you get better sleep, that actually can improve the relationship. If we in ourselves are having improved health outcomes, such as improved sleep, a lot of times that does improve the relationship, or definitely doesn't hurt it. So these are the questions I want you to ask yourself that are very important, and clearly I cannot answer these for anyone. What does this mean to you? So whether we use the term sleep divorce or splendid sleep separation or whatever, sleeping in separate spots, separate spaces, what does it mean to you? Is there any underpinning value, or if I do this, or either myself or my significant other may think that, what is that? And you want to be able to look at, is this true, right? Is what I'm telling myself about this situation ultimately based on fact, or is it based on maybe, some old adage that I, grew up believing, that everyone always needs to sleep in the same spot at the same times, or, whatever. So regardless of what you choose to do, and again, in a second here, I'll switch this off and we can get to some questions, some thoughts. What can help guide you towards one way or another is to determine if you can do a lot of these things on this screen, right? So we want to do all the things that are conducive for sleep, that are not impinging on our own ability to sleep. And I will say, on a side note, a lot of times I work with people that over the course of treatment with me, so 5 or 6 weeks, give or take, they actually move into a separate room for that period of time. They need to stabilize their sleep. We want to take away all the external factors. Once they're sleeping a bit better, they may, return back to the bedroom or sleeping, with their significant other. So this doesn't always have to be forever either, So the things I was just mentioning, though, these good sleep health habits, regular schedule, so important. We want to get our circadian rhythm on board with what's going on. Not forcing sleep, right? Not trying to sleep, not going to sleep when our significant other is going to sleep just to stay in bed for a long period of time to eventually fall asleep an hour, 2 hours later, or whatever. Being able to avoid caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, right? No napping, only using the bed for the 3 S's. That's the sleeping, sex, or being sick. Exercise and movement, very important. Nutrition, obviously very important. No heavy meals at night. Dark, cool, quiet. And that definitely means if the TV is on, if it's yourself or your significant other, right, that's then impacting this dark, cool, and quiet aspect, which are all, definitely helpful. They're conducive for sleep. And then minimal lighting, which again will impact, if the TV is on, we're getting that light exposure, we're naturally not allowing our melatonin, which is naturally occurring in our body, to begin at the right time. So those are the things you want to look at. Are these patterns being significantly impacted by either being in the bedroom, being outside of the bedroom? And honestly, maybe this is one of those things where you are already sleeping in separate spaces, and yet all right, if I sleep in the bedroom, then or if I had my significant other come in, then they will, help me to maintain all these good patterns, right? So there's no right thing to do. It's based on what works best for you. And as I always like to kind of quickly go over, if this is something that you think could be helpful exploring more, or other issues, please let me know. We have the scheduling on the Valley Sleep Center website. It's relatively easy, click on the schedule appointment and you can schedule online. So I'm going to click off here and get back to see if there's any questions. So
great.
Lori, what are your thoughts, since you for so long that you've been thinking about this?
It's interesting because I always just thought about, like, let's not have you sleep in separate rooms. Let's have you come in and figure out why you're sleeping in separate rooms and treat your sleep disorder. I've never really looked at it from the psychology side of things, which what you said, it all makes total sense. I think the thing that I would be most concerned about, because I'm a respiratory therapist and a sleep technologist, is if they're snoring, please come in and make sure that you're, you don't have sleep apnea, because sleep apnea, it is not a benign illness. It will take your life slowly. I mean, it is, why people are having strokes, why they're having heart attacks. I mean, it's very, very important that if you do snore, you need to make sure that you don't have sleep apnea. Or if your partner is saying you're stopping breathing, I have it. I struggle with it for years, and, it took me, really understanding some of my health problems were probably because I didn't treat my sleep apnea before I finally took it serious. So, and I don't have heart attacks and strokes, but I had cancer twice, and I'm thinking, I bet if I don't sleep right, I might have inflammation, which can cause cancer. Yeah, it's pretty shocking. So, but it's funny because Glenn and I one time went, I think we were in Costa Rica for a wedding, and we shared this house with these people, and one of the rooms was upstairs with like twin beds, like June and Beaver. You're too young to know what the Leave It to Beaver. You know Leave It to Beaver is?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, remember the parents, they always slept in separate beds, right, on TV. So Glenn and I volunteered for that room. Number one, it had air conditioning. In Costa Rica, you need air conditioning. Number two, it was like, oh, we'll sleep great, So yeah, I mean, once you understand that, what your bed, the 3 S's, and all those things can be, done when you're awake, but if you truly only go to bed when you're supposed to sleep, and if it takes sleeping in separate beds, I guess that's okay. I mean, it's important that we sleep, more important.
Yeah.
And we can have a relationship, intimacy, all those things when we're not sleeping.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was another thing. I think people think, oh, I don't want to sleep with the mask, or, I have to sleep in the other room if I get a machine, or my husband will have to sleep in the other room if he gets a machine. Just visit our YouTube channel, Valley Sleep Center, all lowercase, and watch the story of Ron and Donna, my friends, that my friend was mortified when she met this guy that he was going to need a CPAP and she couldn't do it. And now she loves it because it sounds like the ocean. It puts her to sleep every night. So, don't be afraid of getting, diagnosed and treated no matter what. Nobody has questions. Shocking. I would love to hear from you guys after this. If you have a question later, feel free to reach out to me. Everybody on the webinar has my email. I love hearing from you guys. This is such a special way for me to connect with patients. And I also would love to know what you guys want to learn about, because I'm committed to doing these health talks. I started doing them because of the pandemic, and I'm having a blast, and it's been really fun to come up with different subjects. And Dr. Frose, thank you so much for always being willing to, talk about these things that
absolutely, likewise.
Blogging about. There's just so much to learn when it comes to health and wellness overall, and I think that's all what we're achieving right now. It's sad that it took a pandemic for us to really put our health first, but it's what we need to do. So, no questions. All right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks everybody on the call.
All right. Yeah. Have a great evening, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.